What if humanity was never one species, but three engineered in secret, scripted like roles in a cosmic play? Imagine a forbidden book, buried in dust, declaring that not all humans are the same. Some are beings of light, fragments of a higher realm who wander this world like prisoners in borrowed flesh. Others are earthbound, molded from clay, obedient vessels designed to toil, worship, and maintain the Demerge's order. And a third kind burns with something different, the fireborn souls crowned in flame, carriers of rebellion who can ignite entire ages with their spark. The churches called such texts heresy. Empires banned them, burned them, erased them, because if humanity ever remembered its triple nature, the architecture of control would collapse. For if you are not who you think you are, if your essence was predetermined, if your blood and spirit belong to one of these hidden categories, then the system's story of unity, equality, and obedience is nothing but illusion. Picture it, the beings of light, glowing yet chained in cages of clay. The earthbound, faceless masses, their hands forever pressed into mud, building Babel's bricks. And the fireborn, hunted, crucified, burned, yet always returning, their flames refusing to die. This is not mythology alone. 'Tis the forbidden anthropology of our species. The question that once got books banned, heretics silenced, and blood spilled is the same one whispered to you now. Which one are you? To understand the forbidden doctrine of three kinds of humanity, one must step into the architecture of evil itself, the system built not of stone or steel, but of flesh, blood, and spirit. In the shadows of Gnostic texts, the Demiurge is described not as creator, but as jailer, a false architect who designed this cosmos as a prison. The material world is his construction site, and humanity is his raw material. But not all humans are equal in his blueprint. Some were formed as keys, others as locks, and others still as sparks that could burn the entire edifice to ash. The first type is the beings of light. They are fragments of the higher pleroma, the infinite fullness beyond the Demerge's reach. Their souls descend like shards of starlight, trapped in vessels of clay. These beings never belong to this world, and for that reason they suffer most deeply within it. They are the visionaries, mystics, seers, whose eyes always seem to look beyond horizons others cannot see. Yet they are also persecuted, branded heretics, cast out because their very existence threatens the false architecture by reminding others of what lies beyond. The Demiurge designed the prison, but could not stop slivers of eternity from slipping in. These are the prisoners of light, chained in matter. The second type is the earthbound humans, molded from clay, animated by breath, but devoid of transcendence. They are functional, obedient, steady, the foundation of the system. They toil, they obey, they build Babels, bricks, generation after generation. To the Demiurge, they are the perfect subjects, strong enough to labor, pliant enough to serve, incapable of questioning the walls around them. They form the masses that sustain empire, the voices that repeat rituals, the hands that build monuments to gods who are not gods. To them, obedience is survival, and survival is all. They are the architecture's scaffolding, the clay molded and remolded without end. The third type is the fireborn, the anomaly, the flaw in the Demiurge's design. They carry in their blood and spirit a spark that does not belong to clay or starlight, but to something in between, something that disrupts. Fireborn souls cannot remain still, burn with restless intensity, unsettling structures, breaking patterns, igniting revolutions. Empires fear them most, for their presence alone is destabilizing. They become prophets, rebels, heretics, witches, visionaries. Some are destroyed, their flames quenched in blood. Others ignite movements that overturn centuries. Fireborn are dangerous because they reveal the system itself, lighting up its architecture in fire until all see the prison for what it is. They are not numerous, but they are catalytic. One fireborn can shatter dynasties. Together, these three types form the system. Light trapped as witness, earthbound as foundation, fireborn as spark. The Demiurge, in his false wisdom, used them to construct a hierarchy that sustains itself. The light keeps longing alive but chained. The earthbound keep the gears turning. The fireborn keep fear alive, hunted so others stay obedient. It is an architecture of balance through control, a machine that perpetuates itself by dividing humanity into categories and ensuring they never realize the categories were scripted, not natural. This forbidden anthropology was preserved in scattered texts. In the Gospel of Philip, which speaks of 3 kinds of men. In fragments of Enoch, which whisper of watchers who tampered with flesh. In Manichaean doctrine, which divides humanity by essence of light, matter, and fire. Across cultures, the echoes remain. In Zoroastrianism's division of the pure, the deceived, and the rebels. In Hindu cosmology's 3 gunas sattva, rajas, tamas. Even in Plato's Republic, with gold, silver, and bronze souls, the architecture of evil is universal, whispered through myths and philosophies. Each culture glimpsing the pattern, but rarely seeing the whole. And what of Babel? That tower of unity, shattered by divine command, becomes another layer of architecture. The scattering of tongues ensures the 3 types remain divided, unable to recognize themselves in each other. Light is mocked as madness, fire is danger, clay is normal. Inversion seals the design. Those most enslaved are called blessed. Those most awake are called cursed. The crown rests secure upon the demiurge's brow as long as the categories remain hidden. Yet hidden does not mean erased. The banned book you now hear of was destroyed because it named the architecture aloud. It dared to ask, if some are born of light, others of clay, others of fire, then how can one law, one church, one empire contain them all? It dared to suggest that awakening begins not with obedience, but with recognition, to see which essence moves in your veins. That is the true danger, for once you know your type, the architecture can no longer dictate your role. The architecture of evil is grand, ancient, and cunning. But like all prisons, it depends on one illusion, that the walls are unbreakable. To awaken is to see that the walls were built of stories, contracts, and rituals, not stone. And what stories built? Fire can burn. Symbols are the silent tongue of power, a grammar older than speech. The forbidden doctrine of 3 types of humans survives not only in texts, but in images, rituals, and emblems that speak directly to the subconscious. To decode them is to see how the architecture of evil maintained itself through centuries, by hiding truth in plain sight, painted on church walls, carved in temples, stitched into banners, and repeated in rituals where no one suspects. The beings of light carry their symbols in stars, halos, and radiant crowns. In ancient Gnostic manuscripts, they are described as sparks of the pleroma, light clothed in matter. Their imagery appears in radiant auras around saints, in mandalas of concentric circles, in the motif of the luminous man, whose body glows like fire. Medieval artists often painted heretics and mystics with subtle traces of light, only to invert the meaning, marking them as deceived, dangerous, or insane. Even the halo, that golden ring we associate with holiness, is double-edged. It can be symbol of imprisoned light or a crown of recognition that this being does not belong to the clay world. Light becomes both beacon and accusation, sanctified in one context, demonized in another. The earthbound humans are symbolized by clay, stone, chains, and bricks. In Genesis, they are literally molded from dust. In art, they appear as faceless masses, building Babel's tower, their hands forever pressed into mud. Their symbols are agricultural tools, yokes, and walls, things that bind, support, sustain. Even modern imagery of the common man echoes this archetype: the worker, the servant, the silent multitude. Heraldry often depicts them not as individuals, but as background peasants in fields, foot soldiers in armies, anonymous builders of empire. Their symbol is repetition itself. The endless cycle of sowing and harvesting, rising and laboring, obeying and dying. Clay is their sigil, malleable, shaped, always belonging to the hands of another. The fireborn blaze with different symbols altogether. Fire, torches, dragons, phoenixes, all belong to them. In Gnostic texts, they are the ones who cannot be contained, the souls that burn with a spark no clay can smother. Their symbols appear in forbidden manuscripts as flames bursting from hearts, as serpents wreathed in fire, as eyes glowing with inner heat. Alchemical texts depict them as the red stone, the philosopher's fire that transforms lead into gold. Mythologies everywhere echo them: Prometheus stealing fire for humanity, Lucifer descending with light, dragon-blooded kings claiming thrones. Even witch trials preserve the imagery. Women burned alive, their flames seen as proof of heresy, but in truth, it was ritualized annihilation of the fireborn. Fire is the most feared symbol because it consumes not only clay, but architecture itself. Color, too, is a language. White and gold belong to light, suggesting illumination, purity, and eternal origin. Brown, gray, and black bind the earthbound, representing soil, stone, and shadow. Red and crimson mark the fireborn, flames and blood intermingled, the sign of rebellion and sacrifice. These colors repeat in flags, robes, and crowns-layered codes that whisper the categories even when no one speaks of them. Numbers encode the same truth. 3 is everywhere. 3 sons of Noah, 3 temptations of Christ, 3 gunas of Hindu thought, 3 metals in Plato's Republic. 2, the initiated. 3 is the cipher of division and hierarchy. But in forbidden texts, 3 is also the code for transcendence, the possibility of recognizing the structure itself. 7, 12, 70. All subdivisions of humanity echo the hidden triad, broken into pieces but still rooted in 3. The system uses numbers as veils, teaching masses to revere them without ever asking why they repeat. Architecture itself speaks the language. Towers, ziggurats, pyramids, structures of stone rising toward heaven represent both aspiration and containment. In Babel's collapse, we see the punishment of unity. In Egyptian pyramids, we see clay labor sacrificed to immortalize bloodlines of kings. In Gothic cathedrals, spires pierce heaven, their stones placed by faceless earthbound, while crowns of light gleam in stained glass above. Everywhere the architecture repeats the story. Light imprisoned, earthbound enslaved, fire suppressed. Even modern culture is saturated with the language of symbols. Corporate logos glow with radiant halos or flaming torches. National flags brandish stars, suns, or flames. Popular films cast characters into archetypes, the enlightened one glowing with light. The masses portrayed as ordinary, the rebels burning with destructive passion. The system survives by normalizing its categories, making the earthbound seem natural, fireborn dangerous, the light unreal. Symbols keep the triad alive, silently reinscribing it into imagination. The forbidden truth is that these symbols were never neutral. They are contracts, images that bind as surely as chains. To kneel before a crown, to salute a flag, to fear a flame, each is ritual participation in the architecture. And yet symbols can be reclaimed. Fire need not be feared, it can be torch. Light need not be mocked, can be guide. Clay need not be prison, it can be foundation for rebellion. The Neogenian texts were banned because they named the categories, but the symbols have always betrayed them. To awaken is to read the grammar of imagery, to see halos as signs of imprisoned light, chains as proof of earthbound servitude, flames as sparks of forbidden sovereignty. Once you can read the symbols, you can no longer be deceived by them. The language of symbols becomes the language of liberation. Blood has always been the oldest currency, the substance that testifies, seals, and buys passage between worlds. In the doctrine of the 3 types of humans, blood is not only biological, it is spiritual economy, determines who serves, who witnesses, and who burns. And the forbidden book whispers that the demiurge, that false architect, engineered humanity's blood to function as ledger ink, writing contracts across generations without consent. For the beings of light, blood is paradox. Their essence is not of clay but of the pleroma, fragments of the eternal fullness. They carry luminous sparks that do not depend on flesh, yet are forced into vessels of matter. Their blood is alien to this system, too pure to be used as payment, too radiant to circulate in the economy of sacrifice. And so, their existence threatens the balance. Empires demonize them because they cannot be harvested. Their refusal or inability to bleed for the system is cast as heresy, madness, or rebellion. The martyrs of light, when executed, shed blood that cannot be transmuted into currency. Instead, it becomes testimony, haunting the system like an unpaid debt. The earthbound humans are the currency itself. Their blood is clay infused with breath, designed to flow in endless cycles of labor, sacrifice, and obedience. From temple altars drenched in animal blood to battlefields soaked in human sacrifice, the earthbound always pay the price. Their sweat, their toil, their deaths are the invisible economy that sustains empires. Each drop spilled builds monuments, fortifies thrones, and renews contracts. In Genesis, they are molded from dust. In history, they are molded into servants. Their blood is malleable coin, minted by birth, spent by others. To be earthbound is to live as currency in circulation, never sovereign, always subject. The fireborn carry blood unlike the others. It burns. It resists containment. Their blood is both spark and curse, seen by the system as contamination. When fireborn die, their blood does not merely spill, it ignites. Revolutions begin in the streets where their veins were opened. Religions form around the legends of their sacrifice. Prometheus bound, Christ crucified, martyrs burned, all fireborn. Their blood refuses to settle into the ledger. It inflames others, awakening clay to question, light to shine. This is why fireborn are hunted. Their blood is too expensive for the system to contain. To kill them is to risk rebellion, but to let them live is to risk exposure. Their existence is the most dangerous economy of all. Throughout history, blood rituals preserved these dynamics. Sacrifices in temples reenacted the contract. Earthbound blood to appease gods. Light hidden away in cloisters, fire suppressed through executions. Crowns were anointed with oil, symbolic blood, to mark kings as chosen. Oaths were sworn on veins cut open, droplets mingling to seal pacts. Wars were launched in the name of gods, but always they consumed the blood of earthbound soldiers. Meanwhile, stories of forbidden figures which as rebels, prophets circulated in hushed tones. Their fiery blood remembered as the beginning of new eras. The system thrives on inversion. Earthbound are told their sacrifices are noble, while in truth they are currency drained to keep crowns gleaming. Light beings are told their refusal is cowardice or treason, when in truth, it is refusal to participate in fraud. Fireborn are condemned as dangerous, when in truth, their blood exposes the lie, that the system survives only by bleeding others. The architecture of evil flips meaning, so that blood given in obedience is holy. Blood withheld is cursed, blood spilled in rebellion is criminal. Even now, the blood economy persists. Wars still harvest earthbound lives. Corporations still drain time, labor, vitality, metaphorical blood from masses. Elites still guard their lineages as sacred, refusing to dilute their bloodlines. And those who spark rebellion, whether prophets, artists, or visionaries, still bleed for it, their fiery testimony echoing long after their deaths. Blood remains the most ancient currency, traded across altars, borders, and boardrooms. If blood is testimony rather than payment, then every drop shed by the oppressed does not sanctify the system, it condemns it. If fireborn blood ignites revolutions, then each sacrifice is not loss but spark. If light blood refuses to circulate, then it exposes the fraud, that true essence cannot be bought. The forbidden book was banned precisely because it recoded blood, not as debt, but as evidence. The serpent crown, the Tower of Babel. The rituals of empire are built on the same economy. Bleed the many, crown the few. But once you see the contract for what it is, you can refuse. The light need not bleed, the earthbound can awaken, the fireborn can ignite without being extinguished. Blood may be the oldest currency, but it need not be the last. The forbidden truth is this: blood has been weaponized to sustain the system, but it was never meant to be coin. It was meant to be fire, testimony, spark, and when enough awaken to this truth, the crown will shatter, the ledger will burn, and the oldest currency will be nullified. Every empire survives on blood, but blood alone is not enough. It must be codified, ritualized, sealed into agreements that endure beyond the lives of individuals. This is where pacts and contracts emerge, the invisible architecture of obedience that chains generations. In the doctrine of the three types of humans, the demiurge does not merely mold clay and spark flesh. He drafts contracts that keep each category locked into its role. The first pact is written at the moment of creation itself, the covenant of clay. The earthbound were not born free. They were designed as servants, their very breath a signature on a contract they never read. Their lives, their labor, their worship became obligations written in matter. To plow the field, to pay the tax, to kneel at the altar, each act renewed the contract. No scroll needed, no signature required. Their very blood was the ink. This is why empires love the earthbound. They are self-renewing contracts, living agreements that perpetuate obedience without question. The second pact binds the beings of light. They did not consent to enter the prison of flesh, but by falling into matter, they were ensnared in the Demerge's covenant of captivity. Their light became collateral, a hostage exchange between realms. Monks, ascetics, and mystics have always sought to break this pact through fasting, meditation, ecstatic visions, but the system reframes their resistance as madness or heresy. The architecture of evil rewrites their longing for freedom into violation of contract, painting the most luminous souls as traitors. Thus the pact holds. They remain chained by narrative as much as by flesh. The third and most volatile pact concerns the fireborn. They are anomalies, not fully clay, not purely light, but hybrid sparks that refuse containment. The system cannot assimilate them, so it drafts a different contract. Persecution, heresy trials, witch burnings, crucifixions, political assassinations. These are not random acts of cruelty, but ritualized clauses of a forbidden covenant. The fireborn are hunted precisely because they embody breach of contract. Their spark threatens to ignite others, so the system enforces punishment clauses written in blood. Their deaths become warnings to the masses. Break the pact, and this will be your fate. Across history, these pacts took form in visible contracts. The covenant with Noah after the flood, the law of Moses etched in stone, royal coronations wear crowns, and oaths bound rulers to divine right. Feudal contracts of loyalty sworn on blood and land. Each one echoes the same structure. Obedience demanded, sacrifice offered, legitimacy enforced. To resist was to break covenant, a crime not only against rulers, but against heaven itself. Thus rebellion became heresy, and heresy became unthinkable. The brilliance of these contracts is that they are self-policing. You need not remember signing them. Society enforces them through ritual. Every oath of allegiance, every pledge of faith, every baptism or circumcision is a ritualized contract renewal. Even modern systems echo the same logic. Passports, social contracts, political oaths. The language has changed, but the architecture remains. Humans live as though bound to agreements they never made. Contracts written long before their birth. The banned Neogenian texts were dangerous because they revealed the fraud. They suggested that humanity is not bound by one covenant, but trapped in multiple layers of contract, biological, spiritual, social. And more dangerously, they whispered that these contracts can be broken. If light beings refuse to be collateral, if earthbound refuse to pay with their labor, if fireborn refuse to die quietly, then the architecture collapses. Contracts only bind as long as they are believed. Inverted morality turns these fraudulent contracts into sacred law. Earthbound servitude becomes virtue, light's refusal becomes sin, fireborn rebellion becomes criminal. The system survives by convincing its subjects that the terms are holy, that obedience is salvation. But awakening flips the parchment. What was called divine law is exposed as forged covenant. What was called rebellion is revealed as the only act of freedom. Think of every coronation where oil is poured on a king's head, every oath where soldiers swear loyalty, every ritual where citizens pledge allegiance. These are not neutral ceremonies. They are renewals of the pact. The crown, the scroll, the blood, the voice, they are signatures on invisible contracts. To participate is to bind yourself again, even if you do not believe. To refuse is to breach the contract, and that is precisely why refusal is punished so severely. The forbidden truth is that humanity never agreed to these contracts. They were drafted by the Demiurge, enforced by priests and kings, repeated through rituals until they became invisible. But what is unseen can be seen, and what is seen can be refused. The Neogenian texts invite you to ask, if the contract was never just, why should it bind you? If the pact was written in blood, not your own, why should you obey? Pacts and contracts sustain the serpent crown and the prison of flesh, but contracts dissolve the moment you recognize they were never legitimate. The light is not debtor, the earthbound is not slave, the fireborn is not criminal. Once the terms are unveiled, the system's paper crown burns, and the pact collapses into ash. The architecture of control is never satisfied with chains alone. It must also invert morality itself, recasting truth as danger and slavery as virtue. In the doctrine of the three kinds of humans, this inversion is absolute. The beings of light who carry fragments of eternity are portrayed as deluded, arrogant, or even demonic. The earthbound, engineered to obey, are exalted as normal, holy, the backbone of society. And the fireborn who burn with the spark of awakening are demonized as witches, rebels, or heretics. The categories remain hidden by the inversion, and so humanity polices itself, ensuring the crown never slips. Look first at the beings of light. Their essence is not of this world. They see visions, dream beyond horizons, whisper of a fullness the demiurge cannot reach. Yet in every era they are silenced. Mystics are declared insane, prophets stoned, visionaries imprisoned. Their refusal to accept the system's contracts is reframed as rebellion against God himself. Their longing for freedom becomes arrogance. Their silence becomes guilt. Inverted morality convinces the masses that these luminous souls are cursed, when in truth, they are captives resisting their jailer. The light becomes darkness only because the system commands it so. The earthbound humans are the most inverted of all. Designed to serve, they are told their obedience is holiness. To toil without question is virtue. To sacrifice without complaint is salvation. Entire religions praise their docility. Entire empires depend on their loyalty. They are the slaves who defend their own chains, convinced that submission makes them righteous. The inversion is so complete that when they see rebellion, they fear it more than tyranny. The earthbound live their entire lives as contracts in motion, and yet believe they are free. This is the masterpiece of inverted morality, convincing slaves that slavery is sacred. The fireborn are the ultimate threat, and so their inversion is the most violent. They burn with a spark that threatens to expose the architecture. They ask questions that unravel illusions. They defy rituals. They ignite movements. For this they are branded witches, anarchists, demons. They are executed in public rituals, burned at the stake, crucified, exiled, so that others learn to fear the fire within themselves. Their blood becomes warning. Do not awaken, do not rebel, do not burn. The inversion convinces humanity that fire is destruction, not illumination. That rebellion is chaos, not freedom. The spark is demonized because it is the only power the system cannot contain. This inverted moral code permeates symbols, rituals, and stories. In Eden, the serpent who brought knowledge is cast as villain, while obedience to blindness is sanctified. In Babel, unity of language is branded arrogance, while scattering and division are declared sacred order. In history, every uprising of the fireborn is crushed, and their memory rewritten as dangerous folly. In art, halos of light are reserved for those who obey authority, while flames are painted beneath the feet of the damned. Every inversion reinforces the same message. Obey and live. Awaken and perish. Even language is twisted. Heretic once meant one who chooses, now means condemned. Rebel once meant one who resists injustice, now means criminal. Light is associated with pride, fire with destruction, clay with virtue. The vocabulary itself is a cage, ensuring that to speak of awakening is to speak in the language of sin. Inverted morality infects even thought, making it impossible to imagine freedom without guilt. But the forbidden texts whisper another reading. They insist that what has been condemned is in truth sacred. The beings of light are not deluded, they are witnesses. The earthbound are not holy, they are enslaved. The fireborn are not dangerous, they are necessary. The inversion collapses the moment it is named. To see that the serpent in Eden was teacher, not tempter, is to reclaim knowledge. To see Babel as tragedy, not justice, is to reclaim unity. To see fire as illumination, not damnation, is to reclaim rebellion as freedom. The inverted moral code is powerful only as long as it remains invisible. Once exposed, it reveals itself as hollow. The crowns of kings are props, the rituals of priests are theater, the morality of empire is lie. The forbidden book was banned because it flipped the inversion back, declaring openly, light is truth, fire is awakening, clay is bondage. To speak those words is to begin dismantling the architecture of control. The forbidden truth is that morality itself has been engineered to sustain the prison. To obey is not holy, it is to feed the system. To awaken is not sin, it is to reclaim yourself. To burn is not destruction, it is to reveal. Once you see the inversion for what it is, you can never unsee it. The demiurge thrives on reversal, but fire burns through lies. Rituals are the pulse of the system, the invisible machinery that ensures the inverted moral code is not just remembered, but embodied. They're everywhere, from grand cathedrals echoing with chants to the smallest habits of daily life. Through ritual, the demiurge's architecture sustains itself not with force alone, but with repetition, with gestures performed so often they become instinct. Every act becomes liturgy, obedience rehearsed until it feels holy. For the earthbound humans, rituals are their very identity. They rise with bells, kneel at altars, sing hymns, recite oaths. They march in parades, salute flags, stand for anthems. Each ritual is a renewal of contract, a silent vow that their clay will remain molded by the hands of power. Their labor itself becomes ritual, sowing, harvesting, building, fighting. The cycle of work and rest, tax and tithe, obedience and death is not only economic, it is sacred performance. By repeating it, they bind themselves again and again to the system that feeds on their blood. The beings of light are caught in rituals of containment. Cloisters, monasteries, ascetic practices, all framed as devotion, become cages disguised as sanctuaries. Their fasting, their silence, their kneeling are reframed as acts of piety. But in truth, they are rituals designed to pacify luminous souls, preventing them from seeing their captivity. Even visions, ecstatic prayers, mystic trances become controlled rituals when overseen by priests who dictate what is orthodox. The rituals that should open doors to the eternal instead reinforce walls of obedience, chaining the light in cycles of repetition. The fireborn are the most dangerous, and so the system crafts rituals of suppression around them. Heresy trials, witch burnings, public executions are not merely punishments, they are theater. The crowd gathers, chants, prays, and watches the fireborn consumed by flames. These spectacles are rituals of fear, reminders to the masses. Do not awaken, do not ignite. The execution is not the end of one life, it is the rehearsal of obedience for thousands of others. Each fireborn burned becomes an altar where the clay renews its vow to stay clay. But rituals are not confined to religion alone. Political systems are saturated with them. Oaths of office, inaugurations, handshakes, signatures, all are secular coronations. Courts demand witnesses swear on sacred texts. Schools drill children with pledges and anthems. Even commerce becomes ritual. Black Friday sales, fiscal calendars, tax days, each one a liturgy of the market god. The architecture does not care whether the rituals are sacred or secular. All that matters is repetition, the constant rehearsal of obedience. The genius of ritual is that it feels natural. Standing for a flag feels patriotic, not enslaving. Kneeling in prayer feels holy, not binding. Singing hymns feels uplifting, not repetitive conditioning. The system thrives when participants believe they are free, while they perform the very rituals that maintain their captivity. The crown does not need chains when the ritual itself becomes the leash. Yet within rituals lies potential for subversion. Just as symbols can be inverted back, rituals can be reclaimed. When a fireborn lights a candle, not for obedience but for defiance, the ritual flips. When a being of light fasts not to mortify flesh but to pierce illusion, the ritual liberates. When earthbound hands build not for empire but for community, the ritual ceases to feed the demiurge. Counter-rituals have always existed: hidden circles of Gnostics, secret societies, mystery schools, practicing ceremonies that awaken rather than suppress. These were the rituals empires feared most, because they rewrote the script. modern rituals still reflect the ancient architecture. Think of the rituals around elections, sports, consumerism. Stadiums filled with chanting crowds echo temples of old. Screens glow like altars, broadcasting spectacles that bind millions in synchronized attention. The system does not care what you worship, only that you worship. Each ritual, whether sacred mass or secular concert, renews the pattern. Masses obeying, fire suppressed, light contained. The Forbidden Book was banned because it revealed the mechanics of ritual. It named them as contracts in motion, agreements renewed with every repetition. To stop kneeling, to stop chanting, to stop obeying this, is the breach that terrifies the system. For without ritual, the architecture crumbles. The serpent crown falls, not with violence, but with silence, when no one shows up to repeat the gestures that sustain it. The forbidden truth is that ritual is everywhere, but so is the possibility of breaking it. To awaken is to see each gesture for what it is, a renewal or a refusal. Every anthem sung, every oath sworn, every sacrifice offered is a choice. Once you see it, you can choose otherwise. Ritual ceases to be invisible and becomes battlefield. And in that moment, the architecture of evil loses its most powerful weapon, the unconscious obedience of the masses. Awakening to the system is not a single revelation, but a slow tearing of veils, a disorienting recognition that what you thought was natural has always been engineered. The Forbidden Book whispers that humanity was never one people, but three categories bound into a machine of control. To awaken is to see the machine for what it is, and to recognize yourself within it. The first veil is the illusion of unity. Empires and religions repeat the same narrative. All are equal under heaven. All serve the same destiny. But the Neogenian texts insist otherwise. They reveal that from the beginning. The Demiurge's design fractured humanity into three essences: light, clay, and fire. To awaken is to admit that the differences you sense are not superficial but structural. Some are born yearning for the infinite, some molded for obedience, some destined to ignite. The categories were hidden, but their influence was always felt. Recognition is the first step, because the machine only functions if you believe you are the same as everyone else. The second veil is morality itself. You were taught to fear rebellion, to distrust visionaries, to hate the fire that unsettles. You were taught that obedience is holy, that labor is sacred, that suffering is noble. But awakening flips this code back. You begin to see that obedience is servitude, not sanctity. That labor is extraction, not virtue. That suffering is exploitation, not holiness. The light you once dismissed as madness is truth. The fire you once feared as chaos is liberation. The clay you once praised as stability is bondage. Awakening means flipping the inversion until every symbol glows with its true meaning. The third veil is ritual. You thought standing for a flag was patriotism, kneeling at an altar was faith, signing contracts was survival. But awakening reveals these are the rehearsals of obedience, the rituals that renew invisible contracts. You begin to notice how every gesture binds you, how every repetition reaffirms your role. And then something shifts. You stop. You refuse to repeat the script. In that refusal, the coils of the serpent crown loosen. The architecture depends not on your chains, but on your consent. Once you withdraw consent, the ritual collapses. The final veil is the self. Awakening is not only seeing the system, but asking the forbidden question. Which one am I? Are you light-trapped, luminous, longing? Are you earthbound clay molded by obedience? Are you fireborn, burning, restless, hunted? To name your type is to unmask the Demiurge's design. It is to recognize your essence and decide whether to accept or resist the role scripted for you. This is the most dangerous act of all, because the moment you know yourself, the contract falters. You are no longer clay by default, no longer fire in hiding, no longer light unrecognized. You become conscious essence, and the machine fears you. Awakening does not erase fear, magnifies it, because you realize the cost of truth. To live as light is to endure captivity with eyes open. To live as earthbound is to struggle against conditioning ingrained in your very blood. To live as fireborn is to risk persecution at every step. But awakening also brings clarity. See the architecture for what it is. A prison of symbols, contracts, and rituals maintained by inversion. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The crown becomes a trinket, the altar a stage, the ritual a performance. They no longer bind. The Forbidden Book was banned not because it lied, but because it named the architecture too clearly. It gave humans the key to recognize themselves, and recognition is the beginning of collapse. For when light refuses to be chained, when clay refuses to be molded, when fire refuses to be extinguished, the system has no fuel left. The prison door remains, but it swings open. The apocalypses means unveiling. Awakening to the system is the apocalypse within. It is not the end of the world, but the end of illusion. It is the moment you realize that you are not debtor, not slave, not pawn in contracts you never signed. You are essence like clay, fire capable of choosing differently. And in that choice lies liberation. The forbidden truth is this: you were never merely human. You were ritual, contract, symbol made flesh, now. But you were also the breach waiting to happen. To awaken is to remember, to refuse, to ignite. The serpent crown cracks not from outside attack, but from the moment enough souls awaken and step out of the play. That is the unveiling, the fire on the horizon, the end of the Demiurge's architecture. And it begins the moment you ask, which one am I? If humanity is threefold light, clay, and fire, then the question is no longer theirs, but yours. Which one are you? In the next descent, we follow the fireborn into their destiny, the Fire King's thrones built on flame. Subscribe, or keep walking into the forbidden fire.